This video is presented by NewWoodworker.com. All rights are reserved. The NewWoodworker.com mobile clamp rack is cheap, easy to build, and very useful in just about any kind of shop setting. We intentionally kept the design simple so that it's easy to modify this to fit your needs. In this video, we'll take a look at all the key steps in building the NewWoodworker.com mobile clamp rack. The most complicated cuts in building this rack are 6-degree bevels. You can cut all the necessary pieces on just about any machine, but I chose to use my miter saw. To make the first cuts, I set the saw to a 0 miter and a 6-degree bevel. Then we made sure to lock all those settings in place. The first cuts were to make the main upright. I need 4 pieces of 2x4 stock, each 45 3/4 inches long, measure from the point to the short end of the bevels. We need 4 pieces, so I cut 2 8-foot 2x4s in half at the 6-degree angle. The bevel slants the same way on both ends of the uprights, so I marked the other end just to be sure that we don't mess this up. Take the time to mark all of the pieces and check that you got them going in the right direction before you make the rest of the cuts. To make sure all 4 pieces are the same size, I set up my work stop at the right distance. Take your time and pay attention to your layout marks. Before each cut, check your layout line to make sure you have the board right so the bevel's pointed in the right direction. Because the main bottom cross rail and the 2 front to back cross rails are all made from 2x4 stock with 6-degree bevels on each end, we went ahead and cut them next. I took my time measuring out the cuts and then made sure that I had the saw on the right side of the mark so I got the correct length pieces. You can make a 1/4 inch mistake and never leave the layout line, so take your time and make sure you got it right. I took the time to drill pilot holes for the screws and countersink them. You want to make sure that we keep these pilot holes parallel with the bevels. With the parts for one set of uprights laid out on a bench, I put glue on both ends of the front to back crossbar. Before you actually start gluing everything up, I urge you to dry fit all the pieces to check their fit. If the bevels aren't exact, you might need to change the dimension of the cross pieces on the bottom or maybe the top. Later in this video, you'll see that I was able to pull my pieces into alignment, but this is a good time to stop and see if you need to make any adjustments. Then I align the pieces, making sure that the uprights are at the right angle to match the bevel. Make sure that the uprights are facing the direction so that the bevel on their bottoms makes a straight line across that bottom piece. The clamp is being used here more to keep the pieces from sliding away when I'm putting the screws in than anything else. There's very little pressure put on it. Then I can go ahead and put screws in the upper holes to hold everything together. I also put the top screw in the other side. I carefully lifted the assembly and put it on top of the clamp, and that lets me install the bottom screws more easily. With both of the upright assemblies completed, I took a break for about an hour to let the glue set up a little bit. The remaining pieces to be cut are all 30 inches long and all have square ends, so I set up the miter saw and the work stop to cut those. This let me cut the main bottom cross rail from the remaining piece of 2x4 and then 4 of the clamp hanger bars, all cut from 1x3 inch material. The main bottom cross rail is centered on the 2 front to back pieces of the uprights. I took my time to get that layout correct and then installed that cross rail with glue and screws. This crossbar is installed with its end flush with the outside edges of the upright sets. Next we install a top plate with glue and screws, and this is where you might have to pull the pieces into the final alignment. This is where you can run into problems if the parts aren't cut exactly right, and why I suggested you do a dry fit up earlier. After drilling pilot holes, I used 1/4 inch lag bolts to install the casters in each corner. My Bosch impactor makes installing these lag screws too easy, so I just run them down till they're close and then use a hand wrench to tighten them up to avoid stripping out the holes. Now we can install the crossbars where we hang the clamps. I held the clamps that I want to hang here up against the upright and marked where I needed to put this hanger so they'd fit. In my case that was 2 inches, but you want to check with the clamps that you're going to hang in these racks. Then to be sure I had it right, I put one of the clamps in and make sure that it didn't drag on the floor. Now I used the same procedure to locate the bottom rail. Keep in mind that we're putting hanger rails on both sides of this rack, and you don't have to put them all in the same place. Take the time and check the position of all these bars to best fit the clamps that you're going to hang on this rack. And this bar works fine for the size clamps I don't want to hang here. These crossbars that I put on the ends are actually the scraps left over from cutting the main clamp rail bars. I just installed them as they were with a little glue and screws. And that should be about it. Your clamp rack should be all ready to be loaded up with all your clamps or just the ones that you need to take to the next job. This is a cheap and simple project that just might serve you well for many years to come. When you get too many clamps to fit on this rack, you can either build another one just like it or use these principles to design one that fits your needs.